want to find out what happened to them, why it happened to them, and who did it to them.
And all you care about is these 5 journalists.
If I find out what happened, it's got to be on the front page.
Firstly, congratulations. It's quite an intense movie. It would have been easy to make it a political history piece with dates, times, ministers, but you've taken it more, you've gone down on the personal level and you've explored the characters, the journalists, and really got down on the human level. How was it? How did you go about researching the character there and bringing that together?
Well, I know right from the beginning that Rob said, we all said that there was a bit of mythology around the Balibo 5, and it would have been very easy to make them this kind of sentimental version of these 5 guys that kind of went in and did it for their country, and it was like all the Anzac spirit, and you know. And right from the get-go, we were adamant that that wasn't the case. That these, in order to empathise with them when they died, we had to make them as real as possible. So in that they were 5 really different personalities. That obviously Greg was known for having a bit of an ego, but also there were 2 conflicting news teams. So there was a Channel 7 and Channel 9, and then what did that bring up? Like what kind of competition was going on there?
What's interesting is that obviously they come across as being obviously young, professional, courageous even, but you look at them and you think, these guys are so naive. Perhaps that's a touch unfair because back then, journalists probably thought, you know, no one gets murdered being a foreign journalist. And we can do what we want.
And
we're
also,
Australian.
don't forget, at the time you had images of Suharto was out here cuddling koalas in Townsville. Gough Whitlam was wearing those batik shirts. Like, in terms of the Australian population, Australia and Indonesia were just buddy-buddy. So at worst, they would have thought maybe their footage would get stolen, maybe they'd be in prison for a while, but never, ever would they have contemplated.
The Geneva Convention in place for journalists. There's a lot saying there was a no-go zone, you know. So I think they felt quite safe, and they were young men doing their job, and there was pressure there to, you know, obviously get the story. There was pressure there to understand that they were invading, and they had proof.
We sit here in Balibo and wait for an attack which may not happen at all. The buildings here are deserted. We spoke to one soldier today who believes that a potion given to him by his family.
The film gets into the Timorese landscape, the people, and and the use of the Timorese music. It's almost serene. You know, it puts you in a state of calm, but you know what's coming.
Well, that's where Rob is such a genius, because he knows that yes, it's tragic what happened to these 5 guys and to Roger East, but it would be pretty audacious of us as Australians to go, well, wasn't it horrible that happened to our boys, when at the same time 183,000 Timorese people lost their lives through this invasion. So he's been so clever in that he's intertwined those stories, and more importantly, the film is about Timor, and it's about the country and the people and what they suffered.
Damon filled me in on this. There were 60 journalists killed let alone this year. 60 journalists so far have been killed. Last year was 108. So journalists are still doing what these 5 men were doing in 1975.
The Anthony LaPaglia character, he's the experienced one, he's the burnt out one, he's the realist. And there's a great scene there where he says, I think with Horta says to him, you're worried about 5 Australians and, you know, tens of thousands of Indonesians. And he gives it to him in perhaps very black and white.
If there hadn't been 3 Australians killed in the Jakarta bomb last week, would it still be in the news? Probably not.
No,
you know, there's so many bombings happening around the world, but because of our national interest, we have this pride, and you know. But what does that say about us as an entire world? No wonder there's this kind of disunity going on, because we see each other as individuals as opposed to a collective, you know, of humanity. And I think that's what's great about films like this.
What's the feedback from the politicians of this country? I know that it's going to Canberra, and
yeah, they've got a screening next week. Look, I mean, it's such a big can of worms, you know, and they know that. And so I think even on Sunday there was a statement from Jakarta as well. The Jakarta Post released a statement saying, you know, that this film is just fiction. It's all based on lies. I mean, they have to say that, because if they acknowledge that it is true, then it has to launch a huge investigation. But I think enough people know now, and with the coronial inquest, people aren't stupid, and they know that it's just time for the government to acknowledge that yes, all right, we made these mistakes in the past, but we acknowledge that was a mistake, and let's rectify things. Let's give understanding to these families who've been going crazy over this for 34 years. It's time for them to get a little bit of peace.
Do you think that that's possible? Something positive, aside from pissing off the Indonesians, that every time this comes up, it's we're going to offend someone. But I think the majority of young Australians have gone way beyond that. They don't really particularly care about that.
No.
They really want closure, I think, or some sort of statement made.
Yeah.
And I guess if there's one person that really deserves that, I think it's Shirley Shackleton, who's been carrying this all her life at a very personal level, obviously, and keeping it in the media. I mean, this sort of film comes out there and everybody's like, look at this piece of work. But we have to remember that as an individual, she's. How did she work with you in all of this?
Oh, she was amazing. Like, and I mean, I know she talked to all the boys before I met her. I was away, but then right from the get-go, she was just so. I mean, obviously she wants this story told as well, and what it does is it allows everyone that she knows and everyone that she's been, haranguing for all these years to now sit in a cinema and go, no wonder you've been so angry. No wonder you feel this deep pain and vitriol. Look what happened to your husband and to these other guys, and no one's done a thing about it. She gets an enormous level of understanding, and that's the genius of this film. Is that it raises that awareness for the whole country, the whole world potentially.
Because we had Tony Manatti, who was one of the last journalists to be seen with the boys, Jill Joffe, who had written the book Cover Up, which is a lot of the screenplay is based on. We had access to people that were with these men and that were fighting for the cause in East Timor and have had their own stories intertwined with the Balibo 5, and they've carried the burden, they've carried the grief of choices they made at the time of not staying and what could they have done. And the East Timorese are the same. We literally retraced the steps of these young men. We lived in the same hotel as them. We had amazing, profound experiences, and to only just feel like we got that in a month, I can't imagine what it was like for the people that were intimately involved with these 5 young men.
Shirley Shackleton recently has requested that her husband's body be returned to Australia. Obviously, with the release of the film and the additional attention and interest that will go, hopefully something will happen in that area. I mean, but we really need the Australian government once again to step in there and say, look, let's not point the fingers here, but we need to do something. I mean,
they put out a statement about 3 weeks ago saying that the only reason nothing had been done yet is because of discrepancies that the families can't agree, they can't get on. And Rob and I were with all the families in Helsinki that weekend, and it was just laughable that we were there with all the families who were so united and loving and want things done, and yet the government is still putting out these statements saying, well, we just can't get it going because the families can't agree on it. Because nothing's been done, that what it creates in Timor is this sense of lawlessness, that people don't realise that their actions are accountable. Like, they can't just go around and commit horrible acts and go unpunished. This sense of impunity, because nothing's been done about these crimes for the last 30 years. People get a sense that they can just do whatever they want.
This is a confronting film, and it's visually quite difficult to look at.
Yeah, it's harrowing.
It is, extremely.
That was deliberate too from Rob. It was like that's what happened, and he felt that we needed to show that in all its brutality to get the message across, which is how horrible it was and how unexpected it was.
The film opens, I understand, in August 13th. August 13th.
Go see it,
more than say go and see it. It's a bit of your own country's history.
Yep.
Even if you don't want to face it, it is a bit of your own country's
history. As you were saying
history.
before, that it's not necessarily a political film. Like,
no.
There are the overtones there, but it is such a celebration of Timor in a way, like showing their culture.
Yes.
And also it's about the relationship between these 5 guys. So, it doesn't get weighed down by the politics. It also has all these sort of very light sort of buddy moments, and it's a beautiful journey that they go through in the film.
Well, listen, guys, thanks for joining us around Melbourne. I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. Great performances, and let's hope we can shake the tree somewhat.
Yeah,
definitely.
Thank you.
mate.
Thanks again.
They know you are here, Roger, because your country told them you are here.
I can see burning in the street. I can see shelling from the ships off the coast.
But you know who did kill those 5 men? Okay, they had the courage to come when no one else did.